tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 612 for November 26, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. We hope everyone is prepared for the holidays.
Best holiday.
However it is that you experience Thanksgiving. We've talked about it on the show many times before, but it's certainly worth repeating. It is one of, if not my favorite holiday as well. The family tradition for me has always been getting together, typically at my uncle's house when I was in my youth. But, you know, you have the family together. You do all of the fun Thanksgiving things that you do.
Yeah.
But growing up in Michigan, you also had the added benefit of watching the worst sports franchise in all of sportsdom have
Not anymore.
A Thanksgiving game.
Not anymore. That tradition has changed for you, my friend.
Well, the tradition hasn't changed in the sense that the Lions still get the Thanksgiving game every year. And growing up, it was
worst
always
team in
built
the league
in.
portion is the thing that's changed.
That yeah, for sure. I'm building to that. You gotta let me build, man.
Hey, you told me I was wrong about something. I gotta correct you on that.
But yes, you know, you grew up in Michigan. It's historically been the worst run franchise. So, you know, you eat, you enjoy being around your family, and you watch the Lions get their asses handed to them. That is historically how it's been. But yes, to Brendan's point, the last couple of years, that tide has shifted quite mightily. And this year's Lions team is very different. So it is surreal. It is very, very different.
Yeah. Where are they ranked now again? I totally forgot.
They're 10-1. The Lions are 10-1.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, you know, they have a division opponent in the Bears coming to town on a short week. So who's to say the Bears are going to be desperate? It wouldn't surprise me. Like, it's one of those trap games, like the Lions could suffer their second loss of the season. I could certainly see that happening.
Still 10-2 for a team like that. That's nothing to scour over.
No, yeah, it's been fun. No, it's been fun. So yeah, the tradition is certainly shifting for sure.
Yeah.
It's nice that we finally have earned the Thanksgiving game. I just feel like it's always been like a pity.
It's
the
finally become an
Lions.
event for you. It's become a redemption arc.
Yeah. No, it's been great. But yeah, I very much do look forward to Thanksgiving. At any rate, with all of that said, it's obviously a busy week for everybody, including Brendan and I.
Yeah.
We've already released our reviews this week. You may have noticed we have our reviews of Wicked and Gladiator 2. They are both out. So you can go and check those conversations out. Really loved having Erica Richards on for Wicked. That was really fantastic.
Yeah. Her passion was infectious.
It was absolutely infectious. That was a really great time. So I hope people enjoy that episode. Great conversation. And Brendan and I had loads of fun talking about Ridley Scott and Gladiator 2. Honestly, one of the most fun conversations we've had all year.
Say what you will about
great.
Ridley Scott, the man and the filmmaker. He knows how to get people talking, for better and for worse. Sometimes all in one scene.
Good stuff there. So so be sure to go and check all of that out. So this episode is going to be shorter than usual, which might make a lot of people happy because our shows could go kind of long.
Although you say that now, you say it's going to be shorter than normal. Then we end the show and we look at our timestamps. Oh, crap, another 2-hour show.
Yeah, I don't have the time or the energy to go that long tonight. So
I mean, you just got back
it is going to be shorter.
You just saw a 2.5-hour movie tonight. So
and I just saw a 2.5-hour movie literally right before recording this. So it's already been a long night. And my health isn't the best this week either. So this show will be shorter than usual, but we do have some fun things to talk about. But because we are keeping things shorter, I just want to note before we get into our box office segment, we're going to talk How to Train Your Dragon, and then we have some more reviews mini reviews. We're another catch up episode
Yeah.
here as we get into Thanksgiving. But before we do, normally we get to this about halfway through the show, but just want to say a thank you to Coffee Cult for sponsoring this show. They will have a huge Black Friday sale beginning on Friday. So you can stay tuned for that. I believe it's going to be 25% off coffee. And that will roll all the way through to Cyber Monday. So you'll have all weekend.
That's incredible.
25% off every coffee they have. So you can be on the lookout for that. And that includes their holiday loot box, which is a great gift. It comes with a bag of coffee and a mug and a nice little loot box.
Yeah.
It makes for a great holiday gift. So be on the lookout for all of that. Coffeecult.com. We thank them for their support. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the box office. We've been kind of been a little anxious for this weekend, right? Because the numbers.
We've been curious about Glicked.
We have been. Absolutely. We knew that it was going to do well. We weren't exactly sure as to what degree. Obviously, the beginning of the month was the numbers weren't there, but the narratives were, right? So there's been some really fascinating narratives, particularly I think of The Wild Robot and its run. But now we have finally gotten a weekend where we're getting summer-like numbers with Glicked, as Brennan noted. Wicked off the gates at 112 million on the weekend. Now, because we are recording this a little bit later than the opening weekend numbers are, it's actually surpassed that by another $10 million domestically. Yeah. So worldwide, that film is sitting at $178 million through its first weekend in a couple days.
That's a record breaker right there. I think it broke two records, if I'm not mistaken. One involving Monday revenue coming in, and then the other one obviously being a huge victory for Broadway adaptations in movies. Yeah, it's not even close. I think it's like 100 million over what was the number one spot being Into the Woods, which was like around 30 million or something like that. This is well above that.
And expected, right? I mean, Wicked is such a huge musical. People absolutely adore it. It's been around for 20 years. A lot of people have seen it. It was always going to do gangbusters. Did we expect it to do this well? Maybe, maybe not, but it's, the success certainly isn't that surprising. People do love them some Wicked, and the marketing has been churning out a lot of content over the last 6 months. So there was a lot of hype and buzz around it. And then, that is competing against Gladiator 2, Ridley Scott's film. Also not doing terribly, right? So that film opens at $55 million domestically. Currently, because again, we're a couple days later, that one has added another 5. So that one sits at 60.5 domestically. Worldwide, $226 million worldwide already.
Definitely seems like the kind of movie to do well overseas, but if I'm remembering correctly, it actually got a slightly earlier release overseas as opposed to when it got released in the domestic market. So that's why the numbers are so high worldwide. It's getting pretty close to its budget number. I think its budget was around 250, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Which to have that this early is a pretty good sign.
Pretty good sign. Yeah. So the budget was you expected it's 24 years after the sequel. That original Gladiator had a budget of 103. I'm curious with inflation how similar those numbers are. I'm sure there's still an uptick to the sequel, but
I think there's an uptick to the sequel. I think it'd be one of those cases when you adjust for inflation, you'd also have to see it weekend by weekend to see what movie maybe had more legs than the other one. Because I think Gladiator, that first one, is definitely one of those films that probably had more of a word of mouth churn as the weeks went on and people realized, oh, this is some type of event that I have to see. I don't know if it was as immediate as what we're seeing with Gladiator 2.
Yeah, that first Gladiator went on to make $465 million. It was very, very successful, obviously.
Yeah.
Gladiator 2 seems like it's well on its way. And I am curious, to your point, Brendan, how far it goes, how much legs that it does have here. And I think those two films will be able to do well going into the next few weeks, right? I mean, Moana 2 will put a little bit of a dent. I don't know how much, but maybe a little bit of a dent there.
I am wondering
more
about
so
that.
with the Wicked crowd. I don't like the Moana 2 demographic is not going to affect Gladiator all that much. But if you're like me, so my family is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because my wife has not yet seen Wicked. She's a huge Wicked fan. She wants to go see it, but we have 2 kids. And my son wants to go, my eldest son wants to go see Moana too. And my wife really likes the first Moana. And she's jokingly debated, well, she's like, I want to go see Moana. I want to see Wicked and Moana. So like this weekend, it's like we have to choose.
I feel like, maybe that was the better pairing, even though they are pretty similar by comparison, as opposed to something like Barbie and Oppenheimer. Part of the charm of that pairing and that grassroots campaign was how different those movies were. And I think that's what people tried to manufacture with Glicked, as we keep talking about. But to your wife's point, maybe it would have been better to try to create some type of Mo-Wicked or something like that.
I mean,
or Wakona.
Yeah, I mean, because you'll have, and that was certainly part of the charm. I completely agree with Barbenheimer is, and we talked about this a lot last year. The reason I think Oppenheimer makes as much as it does, and I still think it would have been successful regardless, but there is no doubt a lot of people went to see that film because of the cultural push behind it. And going to see both and making an event out of it, and you're getting dressed up for both movies. I think there's a fair segment of that, of the audiences that participated there that wouldn't have seen Oppenheimer in theaters without it.
I agree. And I think that's a great point, because I want to make sure that you and I are also we're among those that understand that there is obviously a key difference between Barbenheimer and Glicked. Glicked was something that people tried to manufacture as a new Barbenheimer for this year. And given the numbers that you talked about there, both movies being very successful, obviously Wicked being more successful domestically than Gladiator 2, I don't think Gladiator 2's numbers are due to the success of Wicked, though, unlike Oppenheimer's numbers being successful due to Barbie's numbers. I don't think that cross-pollination was quite there for this Glicked thing.
Sure.
Not quite the same.
Honestly, that's a really great point. That isn't even where I was leading to. Like, if I'm going to finish out my sentiment, I was actually going to make a very different point, but I think what you're talking about there is also quite interesting here, a fun little caveat. Because what I was going to say is, despite, people going to, like, people went to see Oppenheimer because of the cultural event of it.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't think that's really the case for Glicked. But if you were to pair Wicked with Moana, that's where you'll be able to double down on a similar audience that is going to want to see both of those films.
Sure.
But you are right. I think Gladiator 2 is almost exclusively successful due to
its own success. It's its own success.
Yeah. People are seeing that Gladiator 2 because they love Gladiator.
Yeah.
It's, say what you will about the film, but I'd say especially this century, the last 20, 30 years, it's one of the more popular Best Picture winners for sure.
Yeah.
And it's one that obviously a lot of people love. You want to go see the sequel. Yeah.
And it's a good movie.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is operating on a different wavelength than Barbenheimer. That is for sure. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah.
But I do wonder how this weekend Wicked and Moana might, I guess maybe as a contrast to my original point, because I brought it up a few moments ago to say, well, maybe Moana 2 might actually put a dent in like a tiny little scratch into Wicked's numbers if there are enough people like my family who are going to choose to see Moana 2 instead of Wicked.
It could create its own new pairing that no one expected.
Well, and that's ultimately what I'm trying to get at is maybe it won't scratch Wicked at all. If anything, it might amplify both of those films because they're going to create their own.
Yeah, I could see that happening
out of it and going to see both of them.
I could see that happening. What I don't see happening is, let's say, something similar to what we would sometimes see at, let's say, any awards ceremony when maybe certain actors are all nominated for a single film. They tend to cancel each other out, right? I don't see that happening with Wicked and Moana as far as them canceling each other out, and then all of a sudden Gladiator 2 is actually #1 at the box office next weekend. I don't see something like that happening. I think there is a distinct possibility that Glicked ends up being this kind of facade for Wicona or Mo-Wicked, or if you want to do a new pairing that ends up coming out of nowhere. I think there are a lot of people out there, especially families, that are going to do something similar as your wife just put it, like trying to find a way to do a double feature or try to see both of these movies because it's this paired musical experience that can really satisfy both ways.
Yeah, makes sense. Really, I think the biggest hurdle there, it is Thanksgiving, so time becomes a factor. Maybe you make an event out of it. You take everyone, you take the entire family, not just your immediate family, but your extended family. You take everyone to go see both movies. I don't know. Maybe that is the case. Obviously, it can be difficult.
We stay behind and watch football. Everyone else goes to watch Moana and Wicked.
Yeah. At any rate, I very much do expect both of those films to have a fairly great weekend still, even with Moana 2 coming out. And then, you get to December 6th, and I don't really see any competition there either. So I think for the next couple of weeks, those films will continue to dominate. That is for sure. And then coming in third place, I'll note Red One. In its second weekend has a nearly 60% drop off, only $13.2 million added to its run, which makes it worldwide 119. Again, the budget for that is somewhere in the 200 to 250 range. So
that's not good.
Not good.
Not good, Dwayne. Not good, Dwayne.
It's a big bomb. And Dwayne, this is why The Rock is coming back to Fast and Furious, right? Or he's going to go back to the well that he knows that does well for him, because he's seen his fair share of bombs recently. Like, a lot of his movies have not done well.
Yeah. And I don't know how certain people are going to react to some of his recent statements around going to see a musical movie in the theater. Have you seen those?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for those of us in the film critic circle, we don't like what he had to say. I don't know if general audiences are going to feel the same way. I hope that they do, because you're going to see a musical like Wicked. If you know the musical and you're going to see the film version, you have no right to sing in the theater, no matter what Dwayne Johnson says. And if people all seem to fall into that same sentiment, then maybe him even returning to the Fast and Furious movies won't even matter. People might still be pissed at him for this.
Yeah, I know. So, like, I think his comments are quite obtuse. I don't know if I expect anything different from him. Like, I think he's at a point where he's used up pretty much all of his cachet, and clearly people aren't going to the theaters to see him anymore.
Clearly, he's jealous of Dave Bautista and John Cena actually being better actors than he is.
Big time. I mean, and as we've noted, he going back to 2022, maybe even 2021, Jungle Cruise. I mean, Black Adam obviously didn't do very well. And now Red One. I mean, it's no wonder why he wants to make Moana 2 and why he wants to do a live action Moana. Like, he wants to do safe things that are going to be financially successful.
He's best at the smaller things. I think one of his best roles in a movie that's surprisingly kind of funny is that movie Central Intelligence that he did with Kevin Hart some years ago. Maybe it was that 5 or 6 years ago, whenever that was. That was a pretty fun movie. I actually think he's better at those types of roles that are a bit more small scale and small stakes, that prioritize comedy first. He's really trying to go big and it's almost like he's trying to turn himself into a movie star rather than us deciding that for him, which is usually the way to go.
Yeah. But that's been a lot of his career. Like, he jumps into some IP, does well in those little roles, and then milks it for everything that it's worth until people just don't care anymore.
Poor guy.
It is what it is.
I can smell what he's cooking there.
Yeah, I read one big flop. And then Moana 2, I'm curious how well that does. I still foresee it doing fairly well financially, but it is getting very middling reviews right now.
I know.
So, especially with the holidays, does that influence the box office at all? Maybe a little bit of a dent. Do people wait for it to come out on Disney Plus because of that? I don't know. I mean, people love Moana. Like that first one, I think is,
I don't think the reviews will sway those who.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's going to be
at least at first. It's one of those cases if the middling reviews are shared by those who aren't critics, then maybe the word of mouth just won't carry it. It might be one of those cases where it just doesn't quite have the legs to do business in a longer sense. I think the longevity might not be there, but I think at first, the first 2 weeks or so, it's gonna be pretty big.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's quickly talk about this horrible How to Train Your Dragon trailer.
Oh my God.
This has me irrationally upset. I am so mad at this trailer. And maybe it's because I love that first How to Train Your Dragon. And to put context around that for new listeners, it is DreamWorks' best animated film as far as I'm concerned. And I would even go as far as to say that it is one of the best animated films really of all time.
I think a lot of people would agree. Yeah, that and the second one.
I think as well.
I think those two are my two favorite DreamWorks animation films.
Yeah. So to say that we are huge fans of that franchise is putting it mildly. And maybe there was some intrigue as to what this live action film could be. And then this trailer drops and it is just one of the worst things my eyes have ever laid eye, have ever seen.
I hate to play the I told you so game. In fact, I feel like you and I are both in that camp because I've heard so many people who had doubts about this movie still say things like, I'm still only interested because it has Dean DuBois, who directed all three of those How to Train Your Dragon films with DreamWorks, coming back to do this one. That should have been sign one that something was wrong. Like that. And then, we're actually getting Gerard Butler back to play Stoic. Okay, that's sign two that something's wrong here. We're getting John Powell back to score this movie. To me, that was like 3 strikes and you're out. I didn't even need to see a trailer by that point to think, okay, clearly they're just making the same movie again. And then we heard interviews with Dean DuBois saying things like that they're going for more photorealistic dragons, which made us worry even more that this was going to look more like The Lion King and have a very expressionless mentality to it. Well, I call bullshit on that. Now, granted, the visual effects do look good and more realistic, but I mean, to say it looks exactly the same is an understatement. It is almost insultingly lazy the way that this movie looks. And maybe this is all part of the gimmick. Maybe this is just the marketing to cue us in on something that we already love, which then gets us into the theater and we end up seeing something that actually is very different. I do hope that that is the case. I want to be proven wrong because I love this property. And I think Dean DuBois as a filmmaker actually has a very interesting visual eye, whether it be in animation or not. I want to see what he does in live action. I just don't want it to be this. And that's what really worries me about it. everything about this trailer just screams something you and I have always been talking about, is that we're just so worried about the trajectory of what these blockbuster tentpole films are being and what these quote unquote remakes are doing. It's beyond lazy, if you ask me.
Oh, I completely agree. I think this trailer is quite atrocious. Now, Dean DeBlois has said that it is not going to be shot for shot the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I believe him, but that is what he has said in an interview. And I don't know. I'm hoping that he's right. I'm hoping that this first trailer is just the marketing team wanting to give us something familiar for fans to latch onto. Even though I think the rendering of it is absolutely appalling.
I agree.
I completely agree with you. It seems extremely lazy. Again, it has that gray filter that desaturates all the colors.
That's the thing that bugged me the most. It's the background,
yeah.
and you can tell there are many sequences here where actual sets were built. It looks like they're shooting on location in certain sequences as well. Yet there's a dimness to everything that just makes everything look like it's all part of the same cardboard box. There's no dimension to anything. And this is something you and I talked about with Wicked. We know that there were actual sets built for that movie. The art direction,
there's
the production design was
all
great
over that film.
Many movies have been guilty of this, and it's all due to rendering and lighting and cinematography and camera placement and lens choice. Whether it be a movie like Wicked or the year before that, you and I talked about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning not looking very good, even though we know there was so much about that movie that was done practically, yet it didn't look like it was captured that way. And I don't know what, does that save them money doing it? I don't know the story here. I don't know why movies look like this.
It is a wild trend. Yeah, I do not get it at all, especially because movies are meant to be seen on the silver screen. Don't you want your images to pop? Don't you want them to be vivid and appealing? Why is everything so prosaic in terms of these big Hollywood movies? There has to be some sort of budgetary concern behind it, or even worse, they're pandering to how it's going to look on streaming and the way that format is set up. I don't know if that's
a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah.
And that's even more egregious.
Yeah.
Either way, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't, and these studios have got to stop. Yeah. It has got to stop. Because the filmmakers in the movies that are not doing this, it is night and day the difference. How much more visually enticing those films are. And it is a visual medium. And here's
the thing. You don't need color to make it look good. But and if you're going for something that's meant to look quote unquote natural, it doesn't need to look dim, right? Or every color is exactly the same shade of something. When we talked about Wicked, I referenced Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, which is one of the most beautifully shot movie musicals I've ever seen. I feel like he invented his own way of making a movie musical with that movie. Yet, color-wise, the movie is colorful, but it's not the most vibrant movie. Given the setting of it all, it's a very brown and dilapidated kind of feel. So it's not going for color. Yet it looks like there's a lot of depth to it. It looks three-dimensional. And the problem with this rendering that we're seeing in so many blockbusters is that it just lacks that three-dimensional quality that makes movies so immersive in the first place. And it looks two-dimensional by comparison.
Yeah. So I do hope that's something that changes. But as it stands currently with this How to Train Your Dragon movie, it looks abysmal. It doesn't look great. And it looks like it was made on the cheap. We know it wasn't made on the cheap. There is a significant budget that they've lofted at this film, but it looks very cheap. And man, I do not have a lot of hopes for this film. I really do not. And it is
I don't either. That's so
really unfortunate to say.
It's so unfortunate because I think Dean's a talented filmmaker.
I agree. Now, I'm hoping that they release a second trailer that is not pandering to that first film and the fans of it, and it's just about this as an adaptation, and what that's going to be.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. As it stands currently, I am, as I noted, I'm kind of irrationally mad every time I see an image or a GIF of that trailer. I immediately want to vomit.
It's funny because I don't have the same energy of anger when I see, let's say, new trailers for, I don't know, the live action Snow White or the live action Pinocchio. Because sadly, at this point, we've just come to expect that from Disney's live action remakes.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing here with How to Train Your Dragon, it's not even just doing what most of these Disney live action remakes have been doing. It actually looks even more egregiously pandering to that first film than any of these other ones. Because say what you will about, let's say, the live action Beauty and the Beast. Yes, it is, for the most part, those movies are sequence for sequence, but they will at least take some aesthetic liberties to build a new visualization of something. You know, like they at least try to find a bit of a balance there that doesn't always work. This doesn't look, this How to Train Your Dragon movie looks like they just said, take the animated movie, shoot it shot for shot, just with a live action lens. That's it.
And it's not even just that it's similar in terms of framing or how the characters are presented on screen. It is the costuming, it's the production design, literally everything about it just screams the animated film. There's nothing new and inspired about it at all. That
interaction between Toothless and Hiccup before he touches his nose and that trust is built, the way Toothless hunches over, then hunches back like a dog. It is the exact same thing. The exact same shot composition, the exact same camera placement, the exact same framing. There actually is, I think someone posted on either TikTok or some other social media platform showing a frame by frame of those two sequences happening simultaneously. And it's honestly astounding how much they line up.
No, I agree. All right, before I get more irrationally mad, let's go ahead and move on to some of these films that we want to talk about.
Let's talk about good things.
We have some really interesting films. Let's start here with the John Crowley film, We Live in Time. This is something that we wanted to try to catch up with when it was in theaters, and unfortunately we ran out of time. But you have a really interesting rom-com film here that stars Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh. You got music from Bryce Dessner, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
I guess there was a level of anticipation, not just because of, Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield, but also John Crowley is a filmmaker that I do kind of appreciate. I don't love all of his films. Yeah, minus that. But like Brooklyn in particular is a film that I deeply, deeply cherish and love. That was one of my favorite films of 2015. So I was looking forward to seeing if this would circle back to that quality of John Crowley. And I think he succeeded. I think we got closer to that here with We Live in Time. Yeah, I really did like the film a lot.
Didn't he direct Boy A also with Andrew Garfield?
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, another very good
So
movie.
They are familiar with each other for sure.
Yeah, they've worked together for sure. I had no idea what to expect with this one. I caught up with this one pretty late. All I knew was that it was getting pretty middling reviews from a lot of our critic friends out there. I think it's holding like somewhere in the high 50s on Metacritic. I don't know what the Rotten Tomatoes score is, but I at least for, given those that I follow on Letterboxd, I see a lot of 3 out of 5s, a lot of 3.5 out of 5s, which usually indicates, hey, we really like it. It's good, but it's not on the level of something like Brooklyn, right? I feel like I've been hearing that narrative a lot, and I can understand why. But I don't know, JD. Every year there's at least one film that I just don't quite agree with the consensus. I think it's way better than the consensus, and that film for me this year is We Live in Time. I kind of love this film. I actually think this is one of my favorites of the year.
Wow. Okay.
And I think it's interesting because if I had seen this in my 20s when I was still single, I would have probably dismissed it outright, maybe cynically so. Perhaps I'm just at the right age and time in my life for a movie like this, being 35 and happily married now. Seeing a movie like this, and given its narrative framework, which is very interesting. I know a lot of people have commented on the fact that this story is told non-linearly. It's not in chronological order, and some people have commented on how futile or useless that it is given the nature of this particular story. And I don't know if I agree with that. I think given that non-linear structure, it turns this movie into something that, at least I felt, I don't know if this was the intent by John Crowley and everyone involved, it felt like a photo album come to life. It felt like this idea of how you feel trying to preserve these fleeting memories after losing your loved one. You know, like what that feeling is like. And that's what it felt like to me. It felt like the journey of someone struggling to hold on to these memories. And it made for a very fragmented experience that I thought was very deliberate and kind of painful in a way that I thought was very affecting. I really was affected by this one. I wouldn't necessarily call it a quote unquote tearjerker. I didn't have that type of reaction to it, but the second it ended, I couldn't shake this movie. It hasn't left my mind in about in the week that I've seen it. And I think that's a good thing. I did find this movie very powerful. I think I hate to use the word underrated because I think it's such an overused word nowadays, but I certainly like it way more than most people seem to. At least that's what it seems to be.
No, I'm glad that you had that kind of reaction. I mean, I also quite loved the film. I laughed, I cried even more, especially as we got near the end. It has two leads that radiate with immense charm and a phenomenal chemistry.
Oh yeah,
that is
make
really
more movies
great.
with the two of them. They don't have to play the same characters. Let's
fantastic.
just see a string of romance movies with Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh.
Oh my gosh, they're just really, really terrific here. The cinematography, I think, is great. The editing is quite incisive. I do agree with you that the storytelling is quite fragmented, but I don't think it lacks clarity. I do think there is a cogency to the storytelling. It bounces around, and it might take you a brief second to figure out where we're at in the story, but I don't think it's overwhelming in that way. I do think there's a reason A24 picked this up domestically.
Yeah.
Now, I know they're trying to build out like their portfolio, and they're trying to bring an IP or do more things like this that
they're trying to get some hits,
have a larger appeal.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're just going to do that on a whim. I don't think they're going to do that at the cost of their ethos. There is a level of craft here that is fantastic. That is really good. So even though this is a heartbreaking, charming rom-com at its core, it has a level of craft that I understand why an A24 would want to pick this up.
Yeah.
It is extremely well made, and it is really beautiful. I think Desner's score is fantastic as well. I've been listening to that a lot today. It's
I agree.
Really, really moving. And has some really provocative ideas behind it, right? When you think about what she's experiencing, speaking of the Florence Pugh character, Elmet, and why she wants to, or like what drives the decisions that she makes throughout a lot of this. There's a heartbreak behind it. There's an understanding behind it. You understand why Tobias is initially reserved, or he doesn't know how to react to it. But I kind of love that this film wants to explore that, wants to wrestle with that.
Yeah.
And it's just deeply human. It's just such a deeply human film.
It is. I agree. It almost doesn't feel scripted at times, given the way that these snapshots, almost vignettes in a way, feel. The way that these two characters interact with each other, it doesn't always feel scripted, which I really appreciate about it. And you're right. There are some pretty interesting ideas here that I feel like are very universal. This idea of what does it mean to, to be very blunt about it, what does it mean to live in time? Is it about prolonging your time with someone or just simply making the most of what that time is? And that's a very universal message. In a way, you can almost argue it is a little bit trite for many romance movies, but I don't care if it's trite. I just care if I find something real and authentic and sincere about it, which is what this movie does. And like I said in my earlier thoughts there, the fact that this movie kind of feels like a cinematic photo album in some ways, I think actually parallels that message even further. It's kind of like if you can imagine yourself in the shoes of Tobias, Andrew Garfield's character, many years later, this is him looking back and thinking back on this time. That's what it might feel like. And I don't know if that was the intent of the movie, but that's how I felt it. Like, that's how I envisioned it. And that's what made me so moved by it. Thinking about it as if, like, how would I feel, let's say, if I'm in my 80s or 90s and I think back at a time like this? Would it feel this fragmented? Would I find myself kind of struggling to find the pieces that are all out of order now? And I think that's a very powerful notion because I think that's a very real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is titled "We Live in Time," and the film certainly wants to invoke the like not just the passing of time, but as you've been talking about, how it feels almost incomplete in a way, like or at least we have like little chunks of it, like that we can kind of piece together when we look back on it, for sure.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's mostly well handled here. I think maybe
agree.
at times it's a little disjointed, but it's certainly not
Fair.
a big issue for me at all. I mostly enjoyed it. I thought the storytelling was quite well handled in that regard.
Yeah, definitely not definitely disjointed at times. I don't disagree. Perhaps deliberately disjointed, which is maybe where,
I agree. I agree. But and I kind of love that the film leans into that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It fully leans into it, and it's very moving. Like, it's unapologetic in what it's attempting to do. And I will say that gas station sequence was.
I was just going to bring that up.
Film.
I was just going to bring that up. In contention as one of the best scenes of the year.
It is really, really great. It truly is one of the best scenes of the year.
You talk about wanting to see these characters again in some other movie, or at least these actors again. I want to see those two gas station attendants in a movie together. I want to see a cinematic universe of what they experience at that station.
Yeah, it's really great. All right, let's move on, since we have a few others we want to talk about here. Let's talk about Scott Beck and Brian Woods' Heretic, starring Hugh Grant, right? As well as Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. I think what's interesting about this film, right? So it's a movie called Heretic, and the irony is that it is the preachiest film of the year, like hands down, like not even close. A film called Heretic is the preachiest film of the year, quite literally, not just in its messaging, but very, very literally.
Oh, there's a lot of preaching in the movie.
At its center is this sinister minister that I was endlessly compelled by. I think Hugh Grant is so good here. He is having the time of his life, and it is really, really great. I don't think the film is able to live up to his standards, like to his quality. I do think the film gets suffocated in trying to balance its messaging with its machinations. I don't think it quite comes together, but Hugh Grant is fun enough, like, and that irony that this film is so preachy, I enjoyed that enough that I still had a good time here, even if it is a bit of a messy movie.
Yeah. There are some interesting moments of, I guess, visual storytelling or symbolism, I guess, to emphasize Hugh Grant's character's beliefs, which I don't know how true that they are, but I thought they were pretty interesting. So like there are elements of the film, especially in that first half, where I think the script writing is very sharp. It might be a little bit obvious, but I really did appreciate the sort of the bluntness in how it treats the Mormon mentality as it relates to overarching Christianity, right? And speaking of which, please let Chloe East continue to play characters who ridiculously love Jesus, right? After this and then the Fabelmans, I think she is so good here at capturing that kind of mentality.
That's right.
I
She
think
was in the Fabelmans as that character, wasn't she?
yeah,
Oh my God, I
yeah,
forgot
yeah.
about that.
I know. So a little different, but also not really. So
Yeah.
I think she's really great as well. In a way, sort of becomes the lead of the film. I
I
don't want
bet
to say
that's how
more
she
than that.
got cast as this character, right?
Maybe I think
There's
her
got
and
to
her
be a connection.
well, I think her and her co-star do have in real life a bit of a Mormon upbringing, which is maybe what brought them
Okay.
to the material. But
Gotcha.
perhaps that's just a coincidence and maybe helped
Yeah.
amplify her reasons for wanting to go for this movie and why she
Yeah.
ultimately deserved to be here.
Yeah.
I wanted to love this more. I do agree with you on the messiness of the film. I think the first half of the film kind of rules. The second half kind of drools, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And I think that's the general consensus. I see a lot of people sharing that sentiment, is that it starts off really well. I think the film works best as a conversational chamber horror piece than it does an actual horror film. When
Yeah.
it divulges into becoming kind of more of a barbarian-like experience, it did start to lose me. There are still some elements that it has that are able to retain those interesting themes that were established in the first half, but aesthetically speaking, it does just kind of fall off the rails for me. And I say that as I say that as someone that was really looking forward to where this movie was going to go, because I think the opening half here, it's almost best of the year material. I thought it was that good. And where it ends up going really is deflating, if you ask me. And I found that really unfortunate.
Without getting into too many spoilers, can you pinpoint a specific pivot that the film takes?
When they walk down the stairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. That is when the film changes tonally and aesthetically as well, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't mind the change. I don't mind the idea of them changing tonally. I just don't know if it's the right tone given what was established earlier and what I found more interesting leading up to that. I think by that point, it becomes less interested in those provocative ideas on religious hypocrisy.
Well, I agree. And I think where it becomes kind of jarring is that, again, it is very preachy. It's a literal debate about religion and philosophy. That is a lot of what the first half of the film is. And I don't know, there is something about the preachiness of it. It's almost stage-like in its presentation.
I agree.
Translate this on, to Broadway, and it would be fantastic to watch. I
agree.
So there's something really simple about the staging that just allows these performers to just tap into that urgency, that religiosity in a really great way. And there is tension despite how simple it is, right? I mean, we don't really know for sure if this guy is a lunatic, but he sure seems like it. But it's not until they open the doors where it's like, okay, now it's full on horror film at this point. And I don't know, like, it is kind of jarring. And I think the first half of it is much more compelling in execution. I do agree.
I think all of these performances are very good, though. I just wish the final product was really better. It seemed to go in a direction where it just didn't really know how to stick the landing, so it went in a more traditional direction.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next film. I want to talk about the Irish film Kneecap. This is directed by, and I'm not even sure how to say this, Rich Pepiat. As far as the stars here, I don't even have a clue as to how to say these names.
I should have looked that up. I'm 33. I'm 33% Irish according to my ancestry.com. So perhaps it's 33%.
Look,
I'm kind of a
Michael Fassbender plays a supporting role here. That is what I can tell you. Now, okay, so this is about the the rap group Kneecap and their upbringing and coming together as a group. So, and it actually stars the real life group as themselves.
Yeah.
Which I think is really fascinating. This is also, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is actually Ireland's submission for international feature, right?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, at the Oscars this year, which I think is really fascinating. And this film is like, what, 60, 70% Irish spoken?
Which is great, given what the movie is about thematically speaking.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And, we don't really see too many films like that. Maybe that's just our Western like distribution, I guess. We just don't get a lot of
just
Irish
like the
films
fact
like
that
this.
we're sort of behind this curtain that we just don't get to see, right?
Yeah,
we're kind of
but it is
masked from it.
fascinating. Look, you get someone like Fassbender behind it though, and that's when it's going to get picked up at Sundance, for example, and we're getting a distribution here in the United States, which is very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So what did you think about Kneecap?
Yeah, I really liked it. It has an archaic energy that I think is really infectious. It's clearly riffing on Danny Boyle's Train Spotting. That's
sure.
an influence that it's
Danny
not
Boyle
hiding.
is all over this.
All over this. Yeah. I will admit it is at times a little bit suffocating because there are so many subplots happening here simultaneously alongside the main growth of this hip hop group called Kneecap. I love the idea of them playing themselves for a movie like this. I want more biopics like this that are very experimental in that regard and actually deliver a bit of a shock to the system, whether it be aesthetically or even sociopolitically, as this one's going for. I really do appreciate that. But you do get a lot of meandering subplots here involving, let's say, maybe some family life, some girlfriend troubles and things like that, that when you have this kind of energy happening alongside it, maybe some things feel like they get lost in the shuffle. But I want to see more movies like this at a time when the music biopic has become arguably the blandest subgenre yet. So we desperately need ones like this. And I think the songs are catchy as heck. And I do like the conviction of what the group Kneecap is attempting here about preserving their native tongue and how that's getting, lost over time. Like the preservation of language and culture, I think, is so severely felt here that it makes the experience very worthwhile.
No, I agree. I think that's why I quite went for this film. I really, really liked it a lot. I think it's one of the best surprises of the year. And additionally to what you're talking about in terms of preservation of language and culture, and that is such a significant part of this thematically, and the reverence the film shows to those ideas here is really, really great. But man, this film has an energy that is palpable. Is very aware of what it is. I love its self-awareness. It leans into its absurdity as much as possible. However, for as diverting as it is, what makes it so surprising to me is that there are moments here where it subverts tone and formula, its own tone and formula. The best example of it for me is this phone booth scene near the end of the film with one of again, I'm not sure how to say the character's name, but he is the son of Arlo, played wonderfully here by Michael Fassbender. And there's an exchange. There's a phone call between the two of them where nothing is spoken. It is a nonverbal exchange, but there is an edit in this sequence that nearly put me on the floor. It is one of the best edits of the year. What's that?
De-aging of sorts that happens. Yes. Is that what you're talking about? Yep.
And
I
just
agree.
The way it taps into that in a person and how he looks at his father non-verbally without having to say anything. It is truly inspired filmmaking. And I think that's what's really great. I mean, there's certainly a lot of Danny Boyle inspirations here. There's Guy Ritchie inspirations here for sure. But at times, the film is able to take a step back from that and have these deeply poignant moments about these characters realizing where they are, who they've become, and how as a group they've become the centerpiece for this movement.
Yeah.
And the film treats that with this deep sincerity that I think is absolutely incredible. So yeah, it bucks the trend as far as music biopics goes. I mean, it has so much energy that is infectious, while subverting so much of what it establishes earlier in the film. It's great. And Fassbender is more than just a cameo here. Like it is a true supporting role.
Sure.
It might not be to the level of, let's say, a Denzel Washington in Gladiator.
No,
but
he probably
it is
has
more than a cameo.
It probably has less than 10 minutes of total screen time, but he shows up in multiple scenes that it feels like he's
at least 4 different times.
Yeah, and that makes it seem like he's more present than he isn't, even if the screen time maybe doesn't add up to what we perceive it to be.
And what he brings is important. So even
Absolutely.
even more vitally than the screen time, it is that age-old argument of the quality of the performance. And he is necessary, like the way the film establishes that character and especially who he is to his son. That's what makes that edit so resonant emotionally.
Yeah.
Without Fassbender's performance, even though the screen time is limited, without his performance and what he brings to it, that moment doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it does because of, it's Michael Fassbender and he's one of the best.
Yeah.
He's able to really fully realize that character. It's really, really great. And I agree. The music is really catchy, ton of fun. I've been listening to the soundtrack incessantly. I've never heard of these guys until this. And
they've been around for a while.
And they have. I will say, it's also interesting too, like their performances here. Now they play themselves. They're a rap group first. I don't know if they've done any acting before, but man, they make it look effortless, don't they? It's
really
like they've
do.
been acting their whole lives. And these are young kids. Like they're not that old. I don't know how old they are, but they're certainly not any older than I am.
They've been in a concert film before.
Late
That's
20s?
it. They've been in a concert film before.
That's it.
And of course, that concert film was of Kneecap. So, this is them this is another
like first time acting. You wouldn't have known it.
This
like
is
very comfortable in front of a camera.
This is the successful version of the 1517 to Paris experiment.
Yeah.
Obviously, exactly. very different, circumstances given what this movie is about and what that movie was about. But I like the attempt at that experiment and how it succeeds here. And a lot of that is also given the filmmaking, how they're able to match the vibe of what is meant to be conveyed here. The film is very anarchaic, like I mentioned earlier, but maybe a better word is, I was about to say rebellious, but I actually think the right word to describe this movie is punk. It's very punk. It has a very punk energy to it that even though this is about hip hop music, like it reminded me of what maybe a Sex Pistols biopic could look like.
It has a rebellious attitude. For sure.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. Yeah. And I loved it. Like I just completely ate that up. So like, I love how different this is. This is not the traditional dull music biopic that you're used to. I mean, there's a lot of energy here that is really great. And like I said, I love that sincerity. Some of those like that phone booth sequence for me, I think is going to end up as one of my favorite scenes of the year. I don't know if it ended up in my top 5 at the end, but it's certainly up there for sure. And again, I appreciate how seamlessly they fall into these roles, like as actors. I mean, you're playing yourselves or maybe like a heightened version of yourself, but you also have to portray a character. And there are times here where they have to act. They just can't be themselves.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have known that this was their first time making a film.
No, it's very confident. It's almost like they're making a music.
Very confident. Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I really like Kneecap. Let's talk about a film that is very, very different. There's a movie out there that has like a bazillion beavers in it.
I thought you were going to go to something different, but okay, we'll go to this one first.
Well, unless you want to do something different. But yeah, I was going to bring up Hundreds of Beavers is the film. from Mike Cheslick.
Cheslick, I think is how you pronounce it. Yeah.
Forgive me there. What did you think of it? I think you might like it a little bit more than I do.
I think I like it a lot more than you do. Given some of your thoughts on a previous catch-up episode, you gave some brief thoughts on it. And at that time, I hadn't seen it, but then I saw it was on Amazon Prime, and I was sitting with my wife, and we thought, this looks like it could be fun. Let's watch this. And I think it's one of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time. It might sound it might sound like something hyperbolic to say, but I laughed almost every second. I really did. Maybe it does overstay its welcome a little bit by the end, but there are times I actually spit up my drink just given the sheer creativity of it. It's certainly riffing on certain things, but I gotta say, JD, I might steal your thunder a little bit given what you feel about the film, and I know you might, restate some of the things you said in that prior catch-up episode. You mentioned how it does feel very much like mimicry to Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and things like that. And I'm really glad you mentioned those criticisms that you had, because I went into the movie thinking of that. I sensed none of Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton in this movie. Absolutely none. The closest I felt to Charlie Chaplin here was, okay, it takes place in the snow. The Gold Rush also takes place in the snow. That's basically the closest I got. And I think the big difference in why I responded to this movie is the crudeness of it. There's a meanness to this movie that I don't sense in Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, which is more driven by almost like a sweetness and sincerity, especially in the characters that they play. And that's something I did not sense here. If anything, this reminded me of watching Elmer Fudd. Like watching Elmer Fudd try to catch Bugs Bunny. The Looney Tunes aspect of it is what really tickled my funny bone. And I can't wait to watch this one again. I think this one is awesome. I really enjoyed this.
Okay. I'm glad you liked it. I know a lot of people do. I truly do not comprehend, though, how you don't see Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin.
They're nowhere here. They're nowhere here.
It is nowhere here. Every sequence here is a.
That's like saying every silent film looks like Charlie Chaplin. That's basically what it sounds like.
It's the way it's staged. It's how the character moves. It's all. I mean, it is. I agree with you. It is Looney Tunes as Charlie Chaplin or Looney Tunes as Buster Keaton, but it is absolutely inspired by those two and how they made their films. Like every setup here, like how the character moves, like the danger or the potential danger, the fakery, and how Keaton and Chaplin would set it up. I agree. Tonally, it's not the same.
Well, then I wouldn't call it mimicry.
Staging and
then
how the character moves and how a scene operates, it is 100% those in every single way.
That's not mimicry, though.
That is 100% mimicry.
That's not mimicry. No, like mimicry has to also capture the feeling of what it's going for, and that's not what this does. It's not even halfway there. I don't agree with that. It's not even halfway there.
I don't agree with that. Like in terms of staging and production, you can mimic that and tonally not be the same. And I don't think it's tonally that out of bounds anyway. I mean, because it is aiming for a levity that you obviously get in Keaton and Chaplin's films as well. It might not have, like Chaplin, especially Chaplin, doesn't quite have the meanness that Beavers does, but Beavers isn't sincere in that meanness. It is slapstick comedy. Like it is the definition of slapstick.
That just seems like a very high level comparison to me. I think it has way more going on that it. Even the staging of Hundreds of Beavers doesn't remind me of the staging of Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton. The framing seems different. The framing is even different. The way the camera moves, the way that certain characters are so close to the camera is even different. The use of symmetry that Charlie Chaplin likes, that even Buster Keaton likes, is not even here. Even certain things like that, I think, are just. Clearly, it has a reverence for those types of movies that Chaplin and Keaton made back in the day. But I don't think it's just capturing the things that they were doing. If anything, I think it's more inspired by a movement of silent film comedy that was very popular in the 1920s. It just happened to be popularized by Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin at the time.
Sure.
I don't think it's that direct.
There's a lot of duck soup here as well. Like I sense those guys in this.
I sense them more than Charlie Chaplin, I'll tell you that.
I think in terms of the slapstickiness of it, that I would agree with. But I think in terms of the staging and how we're gonna center our character in these faux dangerous situations, I mean, you saw that all over the place with Keaton and Chaplin. Their whole careers are built around that, and that's all this film is that's building around that faux danger and doing it in a slapsticky kind of way. I mean, that's all I saw here.
To me, that's like saying Die Hard and A Christmas Story are the same thing because they take place on Christmas.
That makes no sense. That is not at all what I'm saying here. So I don't even know why we're having this argument, because you can't even engage with my argument. So I don't even know what we're talking about here.
I'm just playing with you. You gotta learn to have fun, man. Come on.
All I'm saying is, I don't. It is reverence, but I think that's all that it is. I don't think this film has the skill or insight to be anything other than mimicry. I do respect the ambition. I did not laugh once in this film, so that's part of it as well.
Okay, yeah, I think it's wildly creative.
I cringed the whole time. Is all that I did.
Okay,
this film gets credit from me for the ambition. I do genuinely admire the ambition. And the fact that it is so distinct to what we get a lot of these days, because there's not a lot of people willing to take on Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin these days. Like, just generally, who wants to do that? Two iconic performers and you want to tackle the way they do things? I mean, good luck, right? I mean, the fact that he was even willing to take that on, I give him a lot of credit for that. I really do.
Sure.
And then twisting it with a Looney Tunes aspect, a duck soup aspect in terms of the slapstick. It is so different from what we get. Absolutely. Bonus points there, which is why I'm not totally down on the film. I just think it's more cringe than funny. And I think it's more copycat than being unique.
Okay.
In terms of its own thing.
Okay. I think it's one of the best of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, I loved it.
Agree to disagree.
All right, cool.
Okay. Glad we went in circles on that. Fancy Dance. That is, I guess, really the last one that we have here that both of us have seen. This is the Erica Tremblay film that stars Lily Gladstone. And talk about a tonal whiplash of a transition here. This is such a far cry from something like Hundreds
That's
of
why
Beavers.
I thought you were going to go to this one after Kneecap as opposed to Hundreds of Beavers.
I mean, that's just how I had them written in order here.
Yeah, I had my notes in front of me for Fancy Dance. I was like, oh, I guess we are going through a little bit of whiplash here. We're going to talk about Beavers first. Let's dance some fanciness.
I mean, but even from Kneecap, still would have been some tonal whiplash because Fancy Dance is a far cry from even that film too. This is a much more dour film starring Lily Gladstone. What did you think about Fancy Dance?
Lily Gladstone, that's my review.
Okay.
One of the best performances of the year. I think she's that good in this. I think it's a phenomenal performance. Holy Lord, is she amazing in this movie. It has very arduous subject matter. I think, if anything, Lily Gladstone's performance is the thing that really kept me engaged here. I think, given the subject matter here around law enforcement's treatment of Indigenous people, I kind of wish the film itself had a little bit more bite to it. I feel like it does flirt with danger more often than it actually really emphasizes the seriousness of that. And it's maybe one of those films I think I could have actually gone for a little less subtlety. I think it actually could have been more direct in some of those ideas, especially given, the sociopolitical climate that we live in now. This is one of those cases where a little less subtlety, I actually think, would have done the material some good. So perhaps that's maybe more of an Erica Tremblay criticism than anything else, who's the filmmaker here. But Lily Gladstone makes it one of the most compelling performative experiences of the year for me, at least as far as the best actress category is concerned. I think she really is that great. I'm trying to compile my early thoughts as far as who could I consider nominating when we get to our InSession Film Awards. And right now, if we were to stop the year here, there's a good chance Gladstone would be in my 5. I do think she's that good in this movie, and really makes it worth seeing. And it's available now on Apple TV Plus if you have a subscription.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done that exercise quite yet. It's very possible she lands in my 5 as well. I mean, either way, I do agree. She's phenomenal here.
Yeah.
Another really, really great showcase for Lily Gladstone. The heartbreak that she displays is great. But I think maybe what I like about her here is that she displays this deep bitterness that comes out at times in some volatility that you really haven't seen from Lily Gladstone in some of her previous performances. I do like how that comes out here. I mean, the film isn't subtle in its commentary, but I don't think it needs to be, given what this film is about. I think this is a film that is actually better for kind of standing on a pedestal and banging pans, as loud as possible to get people's attention. There is something about the urgency of this film, dramatically and thematically, that's really great. And, for all of that volatility in the character and as a result, vulnerability, it kind of leads to this ending that is just a gut wrench.
The ending's really strong.
So
Young Isabel Delroy Olsen, I believe I'm pronouncing her name right, who plays Roki, the niece to Lily Gladstone's character here. I think their connection is very strong. I think she gives a very good performance as well. Yeah,
I agree. So, I really like this film. It is available on Apple TV Plus right now. Definitely urge everyone to go and check it out. If nothing else, just for Lily Gladstone. I do think the film has blemishes. I don't quite love the film in its totality. But I do really like it. It's not going to crack my top 20 at the end of the year, but it is still a good film. It's one I do urge people to go and see. And Lily Gladstone, her performance is certainly worthy of being in the conversation as far as year-end performances go.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I do agree with. I don't want to spend a ton of time here because, again, I do want to get out of here. But I did see the documentary Sugarcane, which is a interesting coming off the heels of the movie that I saw tonight. The film that I saw tonight, I'll just go ahead and reveal it. I got to see Nickel Boys tonight.
I'm so jealous. Jealous.
There are really interesting parallels between these two films that I'm sure we'll get into as we talk about Nickel Boys.
Okay.
But Sugarcane is a documentary that people need to go see. It is one of the best documentaries of the year. Spoiler alert, it will be in my top 5 for documentary at the end of the year.
Okay.
I don't know how familiar you are with this. Growing up somewhat close to Canada, and of course I grew up playing hockey, which involved me being around a fair amount of Canadians growing up. You've heard about this story, but this has also been in the news, in Canadian news, maybe U.S. news as well, in recent years, which is, I think, why the timing of this documentary is now. This has been such a significant talking point over the last 10 years in Canada especially, and it is about the Canadian Indian residential school system that wrecked tons and tons of lives. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And this was run by the Catholic Church, so there's a sense of irony there as well.
Okay.
I mean, this became so bad, the Pope has been involved. The Pope himself has visited Canada as part of the rehabilitation process as far as the church goes and them reaching out to the Native community in Canada. So it is quite significant. And what's great about the documentary is that there's no talking heads here. one of the filmmakers here, Julian. It's about him. He's on camera talking with his father. His father is one of the survivors of the school system. And you just meet a bunch of these survivors and you hear their stories and you hear what happened to those that didn't survive and just how atrocious it is. And it's deeply, deeply human and devastating. So it's not an easy watch by any stretch of the imagination, but a vital one.
It shouldn't be an easy watch. This is also from National Geographic, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's anything to expect, and I haven't seen it yet, obviously, but if there's anything to expect from a documentary from National Geographic, it must be beautiful to look at.
Yeah, it's good. No, it is good visually, but maybe more vitally in this case, it's about its story. But it is well made. It is well crafted. It's well shot for sure. But this is going to be this is a film about its people more than anything, and it's really great.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it.
So definitely urge people to go and see Sugar Cane, available via National Geographic. So I think it's on Disney Plus. I think people can watch it there.
Awesome.
All right, we'll have some more catch up as we go. I've seen a bunch of films recently. I know Brendan has as well. So we'll have another one of these because we're at a point now where we're seeing so many films, and many of them are contenders for year-end awards purposes. That we're
I'm sorry, I couldn't help but laugh. I couldn't help but laugh because you said we'll do another one of these. Another one? We'll probably do another 4 of these, right? There's a good chance that every other main show will be a catch-up episode for the rest of the year.
I mean, it's wild. I mean, I know there are some big releases. We still have Nosferatu, A Complete Unknown to get to here. We got Night Bitch, I'm sure we'll talk about. But there's also
you just saw Nickel Boys, so I mean,
I just saw Nickel Boys. We'll talk about that. I've recently seen the film Flow, the animated film Flow. We absolutely have to talk about that movie. September 5 is maybe one we'll get to. I think it might be worth diving into, especially if it's an awards player.
I think it might be. I feel like people are going to gravitate towards that one, regardless of how the critics feel about it.
Yeah. The Indian film All We Imagine Is Light. My goodness. That's one
I hear it's terrific. I hear it's terrific.
It is really, really good. So that's one that we'll have to try to fit in, as well as some of these more prominent ones, like Baby Girl. That's another one that's coming out soon as well. In addition to some of the bigger ones, we still got Mufasa coming out.
Oh yeah, we have to talk about that. I forgot that. I often forget that's coming out this year. Holy Lord.
Yep, just here in about a month's time.
Are we going to count that as
the Brutalist? Can't forget the Brutalist. That's coming out. That's a must.
Oh yeah, apparently that's a must. Isn't that like in the top 3 as far as frontrunners or best picture at this point?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it might come down between and something else.
And Nora. Yeah. It could be between those two films for sure.
I have no idea where the Academy is going to go this year. It's kind of a coin.
It's kind of up in the air.
I feel like at this point now, the narrative can obviously change, but right now it seems as though Anora is the front runner.
Yeah. I'd say Anora. I'd say The Brutalist is right there as a 1B. And then, but it's still kind of open. There's no clear front runner as we typically have at this point in the year. That is for sure. That'll make for some fun discussion on the awards front here in the next few weeks for sure.
Watch it go to the substance.
There might be a huge surprise. I am dreading Emilia Perez winning Best Picture, and who knows, that might happen.
Oh, you know what? That's a distinct possibility, my friend. That really is.
So.
Yeah,
I think so.
Maybe that is okay. I think that's in the top 3 as far as frontrunners at this point now.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any Oscar voters listening to this, but if we do, I am waving the flag for the Wild Robot.
For it.
Vote for the Wild Robot. Best Picture. Yep, you heard me right. Best Picture. I mean,
I'm going to wave my flag and say vote for Furiosa.
Or Furiosa. I don't think that's going to happen, though. That might be a futile exercise.
I feel like at this point now, I have to call Furiosa the most overlooked movie of the year, sadly. It's a weird thing to say.
It is very weird. No, I agree. All right. As I noted earlier, be sure to check out our review episodes. They are available We have more Chasing the Gold content. There's going to be a Chasing the Gold podcast this week. Women in Session with the holidays, with Thanksgiving on Thursday. I don't know when those will be released. Probably Friday, maybe even over the weekend. Just kind of depends. Also, I don't know if you could tell. For those on YouTube, you might be able to tell. I am pretty miserable right now physically. I have been struggling to get through this episode. So if you've seen me kind of feeling deflated, you might have even hear it in my voice. I've been struggling to pronounce words. My brain's just not working. I need to go
JD,
to bed.
Get some rest. And next time this happens, if you have enough time, let me know. I'll lead the show.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just been a crazy week with Thanksgiving and stuff.
Yeah.
Usually it's not like this, but at any rate, that explains my performance this week and why I've been
You did
all
fine.
over the place.
You did great. We actually had a disagreement, and you held your own very well.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I was trying not to fall apart here at the seams.
Yeah.
But I probably will as soon as we stop this recording. At any rate, just bear with me over the next few days as I kind of recover, and the holidays, and maybe taking the fam to see Moana 2 if I can muster the energy. So, anyway, with all that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.